I'm Alexandra Walker, 24 years old, and if you had seen me that night walking through the front door of our house, you might have thought I was just tired from work. My blazer was wrinkled from the drive and my heels clicked too loudly on the hardwood floors. But I wasn't expecting a welcome. I was expecting another pile of laundry dumped at my feet and a list of chores from my younger brother Ethan, who hadn't lifted a finger since he dropped out of college. My hand still hurt from the blister I got ironing his shirt last week, and before I could even set my bag down, I heard his voice call from the couch. "Hey, Alex, my room's a mess, and I'm out of clean socks." And when I didn't answer, our mother came around the corner with a look that could slice steel. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever had to draw a line when your own family crossed it, I was raised in Pennsylvania just outside Allentown, in one of those suburban neighborhoods where every lawn looks the same and people wave at you from their driveways. My parents, Harold and Margaret, were proud of what they built. Dad managed a car dealership and Mom stayed home to care for the house. Back then, things felt simple. I have photos of birthday parties where my parents held me in their arms, smiling as if nothing else in the world mattered. But that changed. When Ethan was born, I was 4 years old. When my mother brought him home wrapped in a blue blanket, and from that moment on, something shifted. Not overnight, but slowly, like water rising in a room too quietly to notice. At first, it was just less attention. Bedtime stories, forgotten trips to the park, canceled with soft apologies. I told myself they were just busy with the baby. I believed that until I turned 7 and was expected to help set the table, wash my own clothes, and keep my room spotless, while Ethan at 3 was praised for pouring his own cereal. When I pointed it out, Mom would say boys develop differently, or he's just a little thing. Let him enjoy childhood. But I remembered being that age I hadn't been let off the hook by the time I hit 10. I was vacuuming the living room and folding towels after school while Ethan played video games and waited for dinner to be handed to him. High school made the differences more obvious. I made honor roll every semester, captained the debate team, even helped tutor younger students when I got a scholarship award. Mom said, "That was nice," and tacked the certificate on the fridge for a week when Ethan made junior varsity basketball as a freshman. They framed his photo and went to every game. Dad even missed work for one out-of-town match. I watched from the window as they loaded up the car and waved goodbye without asking if I needed a ride to my own event. College wasn't much different. I worked 2 part-time jobs and still racked up $20,000 in loans. They told me we had to prioritize Ethan's education since boys needed to support a household someday. I earned a degree in accounting and moved home, thinking I'd save up for a few months before getting a place of my own. But when Ethan came back after dropping out of college, suddenly there wasn't room to breathe anymore. My mother went right back to treating him like royalty, cooking his favorite meals and folding his laundry before he even asked. Dad paid for his parties, his gas, his everything. I was expected to pick up whatever they didn't feel like doing. Ethan started leaving sticky notes on my door with laundry instructions or snack requests. Sometimes he wouldn't even say thank you. He'd just toss me his wallet and ask for soda from the corner store. Mom called me ungrateful when I asked why he couldn't do anything himself. And Dad said Ethan was finding himself and needed time. One Friday night I came home late from work. The house was filled with noise music, beer, pizza boxes, strangers. Ethan had thrown a party again, and when he asked me to cook for them, like I was staff at a diner, something in me shifted. I told him no, not tonight, not ever again, and went to my room thinking that would be the end of it. But around midnight, my father pounded on my door, told me to open up, and when I did, my parents stood there furious. They accused me of humiliating Ethan, said I needed to apologize, said if I didn't, I could find somewhere else to live. I shut the door behind them and sat on the floor, heart racing, cheek burning from the slap Mom gave me, tears falling without sound. There in the dark, I understood something. I'd been too afraid to admit for years in this house. Love wasn't unconditional. It came with chores and silence and obedience, especially if you were a daughter. And as the first hints of daylight touched the walls, I made a quiet promise I would never serve anyone who treated me like that again. I stayed in bed long after the rest of the house had woken up. Sunlight crept across the wall while muffled voices floated up from the kitchen, but I didn't move. I stared at the ceiling, still hearing my father's voice from the night before, still feeling the sting of my mother's slap. They had made it clear if I didn't apologize to Ethan and return to my place in the household, I'd have to leave, but I had nowhere else to go. Not yet. Around 9:30, I heard heavy footsteps followed by a knock on my door. Then, Ethan's voice louder than necessary. "Alex, where's breakfast?" Mom says. "You're cooking today." I didn't answer. More knocking followed silence, then his voice again. "Fine, be that way." "Mom, Alex won't make breakfast." I listened to him stomp back down the stairs, followed by the sound of my mother's raised voice. A few minutes later, my father's voice echoed through the hallway. "Alexandra Marie, open this door right now." I sat up slowly, still in the clothes I'd worn the day before, and opened the door. He stood there, red in the face, Mom beside him, arms crossed, and Ethan behind them, smirking. "What is wrong with you?" Dad snapped. "Your mother asked you to help with breakfast while she's cleaning up from last night, and you're hiding up here." "I'm not hiding," I said quietly. "I'm not feeling well." "Don't lie to me," he said, stepping closer. "This is about last night, isn't it? You're still sulking." "I worked 60 hours this week," I said, keeping my voice even. "I came home to a house full of strangers and was asked to cook at 10 o'clock at night. I think I'm allowed to sleep in on my day off. We had an agreement. Dad said, 'You live here, rent-free. You help around the house. Ethan lives here rent-free too,' I said. 'What does he do?' Mom pushed past Dad enough. 'I won't have you talking about your brother like this. He's going through a difficult time. So, am I said louder than I meant to. "I'm paying off student loans trying to save for my own place, working full-time and still expected to play maid." "You ungrateful girl," Mom hissed. Then before I could move, her hand struck my cheek. Sharp and sudden, I stumbled back. My hand flying to my face, shocked into silence, she leaned. In her voice, low and bitter, "Feed your brother or get out, worthless girl," from the corner of my eye. I saw Ethan still standing there, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Margaret." "Calm down," Dad said, his hand on Mom's shoulder, but he didn't look at me kindly. "Alexandra, this behavior stops now. Go downstairs, make breakfast, then clean up the mess from last night. We'll talk about your attitude." After I didn't move. My cheek throbbed, and my legs wouldn't work when I didn't step forward. Dad's expression shifted now. "Alexandra." "No," I said, barely loud enough to hear. "What did you just say?" His voice dropped low. I looked him in the eye. I said, "No, I'm not making breakfast. I'm not cleaning up Ethan's mess. I'm not his servant." Dad's face tightened. He reached down, unbuckling his leather belt, pulling it slowly from his jeans. He needs to be taught respect. My heart pounded as he doubled the belt in his hand. "Harold," Mom said quietly, but there wasn't protest in her voice. She sounded more surprised than concerned. "She needs to learn," Dad said firmly. "Step aside, Margaret." I backed toward my dresser, the belt still dangling from his hand. "Dad, please, this is crazy." "What's crazy is your disrespect," he said, raising the belt. "Turn around." I bolted for the door, but he grabbed my arm, dragging me back. The first strike landed across my upper arm, sharp pain blooming down to my elbow. I cried out, "Please stop." I tried to shield myself, but he struck again across my back. "You will learn to respect this family," he shouted, blow after blow until I collapsed, sobbing, curled up on the floor. I could hear Ethan in the doorway, unmoving, watching. I couldn't tell if his face held shock or pleasure, maybe both. Finally, Dad stepped back, panting. He slid the belt through his loops again. "When you're ready to apologize and take responsibility, you can come downstairs," he said. Then they all left, closing the door behind them. I stayed on the floor for a long time, shaking, unable to think clearly. Eventually, I pulled myself to the bed and reached for my phone, fingers trembling. I texted Jessica, "Can I come over emergency?" Her reply came instantly. "Of course, what's wrong?" I stared at the screen for a moment before typing, "Can't explain. Now I'll tell you when I get there, leaving now." I moved slowly, gathering a few clothes and essentials, trying not to cry out when the fabric brushed against my bruises. I slipped out the back door, careful not to be seen. The sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen filtered through the windows, Ethan's laugh echoing as if nothing had happened. Each step to my car sent a jolt of pain up my spine, but I kept walking. Jessica opened the door with a look of alarm that quickly turned to horror when she saw me. Her arms wrapped around me gently and guided me to the couch. "What happened?" she asked. I told her everything in bits and pieces through tears. The party, the argument, the slap, the belt. She sat beside me, listening, her face pale. "We need to call the police," she said quietly. "This is assault. Your dad should be arrested." I shook my head. "I can't. They're still my parents. I just need to get out of there for good." "Then stay here," she said without hesitation. "My couch pulls out. You can have it as long as you need. Are you sure I don't want to impose?" "This isn't imposing, Alex," she said firmly. "This is safety, but we need a plan for the next few hours. We mapped it out. I'd stay with her for 2 weeks, long enough to find a studio apartment within budget. We searched listings, marked a few possibilities. Most were small and in rougher neighborhoods, but they were mine. Jessica promised she'd help with the move. Whatever it took on Monday, I arrived early to work. My supervisor, Diana, hadn't yet seen me like this, but I needed extra hours if I was going to manage rent. I knocked on her door at 7:30. "Come in," she said, surprised to see me so early. "Alexandra, what can I do for you?" I sat down across from her desk. "I wanted to ask about taking on more responsibilities, especially during tax season. I need to pick up more hours." She studied me for a moment. "Is everything okay? You've seemed distracted lately." I hesitated, then nodded. "I'm moving out on my own sooner than expected. My budget's tight." Her expression softened. She nodded slowly. "I'll talk to Lawrence in bookkeeping. He's always needing weekend help with our small business clients. You can take on another 15-20 hours, if you're up for it." Relief washed over me. "Thank you, Diana. Don't thank me yet. It'll be hard. You'll be working 6, sometimes 7 days a week." "I can handle it," I said. "I need to." She nodded, then added quietly, "And Alexandra, if you ever need time or things get worse, let me know. Your safety comes first." For the next 2 weeks, I poured myself into work. I arrived before dawn and often didn't leave until night. Weekends were long, but each paycheck brought me closer to independence. Jessica and I visited a handful of rentals until we found a small studio in an older building. It had a tiny kitchen and creaky floors, but it was clean, secure, and the rent was just within reach. The landlord, Mr. Pfizer, was kind but firm. He needed first and last month's rent, plus a deposit. I was $500 short. Jessica didn't hesitate. She offered to cover the rest. "Pay me back when you can," she said. "This is worth it." My phone buzzed daily with missed calls from my mother. Voicemails alternating between scolding and pleading. Dad left one message saying we needed to talk about my behavior. Ethan sent one text. "Mom and Dad are freaking out. Just apologize and come home." None of them asked where I was staying or if I was okay. Their concern wasn't for me, it was for the roles we'd left. Empty. I hadn't gone back to the house since that night, but one afternoon my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize when I answered. A familiar voice said, "Alexandra, it's Elaine Peterson." "From next door, Mrs. Peterson, how did you get my number? Your mom gave it to me years ago," she said gently. "I saw what happened that morning from my kitchen window, shouting the way you left with that bag." "I've been worried I'm okay," I said, "staying with a friend." "I'm glad," she said. Then after a pause, "Alexandra, I've lived next to your family for 15 years, and I've seen how they treat you. It's not right." My throat tightened. "Thank you for saying that. Do you need anything?" she asked. "Help moving? Maybe I can let you know when they're out the following weekend." She texted that the family had gone to my aunt's birthday lunch. Jessica and I drove over right away. We moved quickly, packing clothes, documents, and anything irreplaceable. Mrs. Peterson stood watch from her yard as we loaded the last box. She walked over and handed me a small wrapped package. A housewarming gift, she said, her voice warm inside, was a ceramic mug with delicate lettering. She believed she could, so she did. "I've watched you grow up," she said, "and you've always been strong even when they couldn't see it. Now it's time to be strong for yourself." As we pulled away from the curb, the last box buckled in the back seat, I glanced at the house in the rearview mirror. The curtains were still drawn, the windows still closed, but something in me had opened. By the time I signed the lease on the apartment, my entire body ached from the inside out. The physical bruises had started to fade, but there was a different kind of heaviness that stuck around, a quiet ache that settled deep in my chest each night. That first week in the studio, I sat on the edge of a mattress borrowed from Jessica's cousin, staring at the bare walls. I didn't own a lamp, a chair, or even a proper set of plates. I used a shoebox as a nightstand and ate dinner standing at the counter because there was nowhere to sit. Jessica came by most evenings after work bringing leftovers or a bottle of grocery store wine. We'd sit cross-legged on the floor with takeout containers between us, laughing about the smallest things: a weird client email, someone's awful parking job outside the office. Anything to take the edge off. She never asked too many questions, never tried to fix anything. She just kept showing up. My schedule didn't leave much room to think. I worked from 7 to 5 at the firm, then spent weekends helping Lawrence in bookkeeping. I packed a peanut butter sandwich every morning and rationed it between lunch and dinner. On Sundays, I walked to the laundromat and read financial reports while my clothes spun behind scratched glass. When the apartment felt too quiet, I'd turn on the radio just to hear someone's voice. Sometimes, though, the silence came anyway. I'd be brushing my teeth at night and hear the sound of footsteps on the stairs from my old house, even though I wasn't there. I'd smell my mother's pot roast out of nowhere, and it would stop me mid-step. I'd picture the garden I used to take care of, the one by the back fence where the marigolds always bloomed first. It would hit me in waves, the fact that I missed pieces of that life, even the parts that had hurt. One night, about 3 weeks after I moved in, I checked my phone and saw I had 12 missed calls from my mom. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I just sat on the floor by the window watching the streetlights flicker on. Jessica came over later that night and brought plastic storage bins from her garage. We sorted my things together, folded clothes into neat stacks, set aside items to donate, stacked books into piles that made sense. It wasn't much, but it felt like I was building something. At work, things shifted quietly. Diana started looping me in on client meetings, and Lawrence handed off full ledgers instead of just spreadsheets. I kept my head down, finished every task ahead of schedule, and took notes like they were gospel. On a Wednesday morning in late April, Diana pulled me aside after our staff meeting. "You've been steady," she said, walking me into her office. "Reliable. I noticed that." I nodded, unsure where she was going. She opened a folder on her desk and slid a paper toward me. "We're adding a new senior position. More responsibility, more client work, higher pay. I think you should apply." I stared at the page, reading the title 3 times before the words made sense. I asked, "Are you sure I'm ready?" Diana smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't come easily from her. "You've already been doing the work," she said. "It's time you got credit for it." That night, I walked home slower than usual, thinking about everything that had changed in just a few months. I still had bruises along my ribs, but they were almost gone. I still kept the phone on silent most nights, but I wasn't afraid when it rang anymore. The next morning, I printed out my resume and applied for the position. It was early June when Mrs. Peterson called again. I was standing in the laundry room with a basket on my hip when the phone buzzed. "Alexandra," she said, "just thought you should know your parents had some kind of blow-up with Ethan this week. He was yelling in the driveway again." I leaned against the wall listening. "Your mother told him she's not doing his laundry anymore. Said he's old enough to take care of himself. Your father backed her up this time. I've never seen that before." I thanked her and hung up, unsure what to make of it. Later that evening, a text came from Ethan. It read, "This sucks. Mom says I have to clean my own stuff now. You really not coming back?" I stared at it for a while, then typed, "I'm not coming back, Ethan, but if you want to learn how the washer works, I can show you sometime." He didn't reply. I didn't expect him to. A week passed. Then one Saturday morning there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and froze. Ethan stood in the hallway looking thinner than I remembered, hair uncombed, holding nothing but his phone. I opened the door but didn't invite him in right away. "Hey," he said, "can I come in?" I stepped aside. He looked around the apartment slowly, eyes moving from the tiny kitchen to the single shelf of books by the window. "It's nice," he said. "Small, but nicer than I thought." I waited. "Things at home are different now," he said, sitting down on the edge of my folded blanket. "Dad's on me about finding a job. Mom won't make my meals anymore. It's a lot." He looked up. "I was thinking maybe I could stay here for a little bit, just until they cool off." I didn't say anything right away. I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded. "You want to stay with me?" I said, "after everything that happened?" "It's in the past," he said. "We're family, right?" "Being family doesn't mean I owe you a place to crash," I said quietly. "It doesn't mean I forget what it was like being in that house." He stood up. "So that's it. You're not going to help me." "I am helping you," I said, "by not making it easy for you to keep avoiding responsibility. But if you want to learn how to do laundry or cook or set a budget, I'll teach you. Not because I owe it to you, because I care." He looked down at his shoes, then turned toward the door. "I knew this was a waste of time," he muttered. "Ethan," I said as he pulled the door open, "my offer stands. You can take it or leave it." He didn't answer. The door closed behind him. That night I sat in the window with a cup of tea, the breeze warm through the screen. I didn't know if he'd ever reach back out, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel responsible for his choices. 2 months after Ethan walked out of my apartment, the text came from a number I hadn't seen in weeks. "Dinner Sunday. Just us. Dad wants to talk." It was from my mother. No apology, no context. I reread it twice before setting the phone down. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, but I wasn't sure in which direction. That night, I called Jessica. I read the message aloud, then waited. "You're not going, are you?" she asked. I said I hadn't decided. Sunday came anyway, 6 o'clock sharp. I stood outside their front door in a loose sweater, my fingers tightening around the strap of my bag. I hadn't stepped foot inside that house since the day I left. Jessica waited in her car across the street just in case. I rang the doorbell. My mother answered with a soft, forced smile. "Alexandra," she said, stepping aside. "Come in." The dining room looked the same. Same table, same chairs, same 3 candles lined up in the center like always. My father was already seated, arms crossed, a glass of water in front of him. Ethan wasn't there. "We thought it should just be the three of us," my mother said as I sat down. "No distractions." I waited. My father cleared his throat. "We've had some time to think." I didn't say anything. "You left without saying much," he continued. "And maybe we didn't handle things the right way." I glanced at him, but his eyes were focused on the candle wick that hadn't been lit. My mother reached for her glass. "Your father means that some things got out of hand." I sat still. I wasn't sure what they expected me to say. "We want to move forward," she said. "Start fresh." I looked at the table. The roast chicken was untouched. The rolls were still warm. It felt like every Sunday dinner from my childhood, except this time I had the words they never let me say. I took a breath. "Do you know why I left?" My mother's hand paused mid-reach. My father's jaw tightened. "Because I wasn't your daughter," I said quietly. "I was your backup cook, your unpaid cleaner, your emotional dumping ground. And when I finally said no, you hit me. You both did." My father's face turned red. "I disciplined you. I was raised that way." I shook my head. "You hurt me. You left bruises." My mother looked down at her plate. "You're not a child anymore." "Exactly," I said, "which is why I don't live here." The room fell silent for a long moment. My father pushed back from the table, stood, and walked into the kitchen. The faucet turned on. My mother stayed seated. "We're trying," she said. "It's not easy to change old habits." I looked at her. "I don't need you to change overnight. I just need you to see what happened." "I see it," she said barely above a whisper. I didn't stay for dinner. I stood, thanked her for the invitation, and walked out the door without waiting for a response. Jessica was still parked in the same spot, her hand resting on the steering wheel. She didn't ask anything. I just nodded once, and we drove off. The next morning at work, Diana stopped by my desk. "Got a minute?" she asked. I followed her into her office, where she handed me a folder. "The promotion's yours," she said, "effective next week." The number on the salary line made me catch my breath. I looked up. "Thank you." She nodded. "You earned it." That afternoon I bought a real table. Nothing fancy, just something with 4 legs and enough space to seat 2. I ordered it online scheduled delivery and used my lunch break to stop by a home goods store for plates that matched. That weekend, I invited Jessica over for dinner, and for the first time in years, I cooked because I wanted to. A month passed, then another. I didn't hear from Ethan, but Mrs. Peterson kept me updated. She called one afternoon while I was watering the plant by the kitchen window. "He's been doing his own laundry," she said. "Your mother stopped helping entirely. He's not thrilled." I smiled. "Thank you for keeping an eye out." "You're welcome, dear," she said. "You did the hard part." Summer faded into fall, and with the new season came something I hadn't expected: space. My weekends weren't packed with errands for anyone else. My evenings were quiet. I joined a walking group that met near the lake, made a few friends, even went on a couple of dates. I didn't talk about my family, not right away. It was enough to feel like myself again. Then one Thursday night in October, there was a knock at my door. It was Ethan. He stood in the hallway with a small grocery bag in one hand and a worn look in his eyes. "I made spaghetti," he said. "I thought maybe we could eat together." I hesitated. He waited. I stepped back to let him in. He moved quietly, setting the bag on the counter and pulling out 2 containers. "I followed a recipe," he said. "Didn't burn anything, I think." I set out plates while he opened the containers. We ate in silence for the first few minutes, forks clicking softly against ceramic. Halfway through, he cleared his throat. "I didn't get it before. I really didn't." I looked up. "I just thought you were being dramatic," he said. "But it's different now, harder than I thought." I nodded but didn't speak. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for everything." I set my fork down. "I appreciate that." He nodded slowly. I don't expect things to go back the way they were. I'm trying. That's all you can do, I said. After he left, I stood by the window for a long time. The streetlights blinked on, casting soft orange light across the sidewalk. My apartment was quiet again, peaceful. But now it held something new, the beginning of something I hadn't thought possible, a different kind of connection, one built on choice, not obligation. Thanksgiving crept up quietly that year. The firm closed early the day before, and Diana let everyone leave by 3. I picked up groceries on my way home, not much, just enough to make a simple meal for 2. Jessica had offered to come by with a pumpkin pie and a bottle of wine. No pressure, she said in her usual soft way. Just good food, warm socks, and no talk about family unless you want to. That sounded like exactly what I needed. The apartment still smelled faintly of roasted garlic when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. The message was short. Your father and I are having dinner at 7. We'd like you to come. I didn't respond right away. I stood by the window watching the bare branches outside sway gently in the wind. I read the message again, then slipped the phone into the kitchen drawer and pulled out 2 plates. Jessica arrived just after 6. We ate on the new dining table I'd bought with my first full paycheck after the promotion, the one with smooth corners and a soft oak finish. I lit a candle. We didn't talk about the message. Later that weekend, I found myself walking through the local antique market, something I hadn't done since college. I ran my fingers over old picture frames and rows of handmade mugs. One of the vendors, a woman named Marla, told me she was downsizing and needed to let go of everything quickly. We talked for a few minutes, and I left with a small wooden bookshelf and a vintage mirror. It was the first time in months I'd bought something just because it made me happy. At work, things kept moving. I started training a new hire named Cassidy, fresh out of school and eager to prove herself. I saw a little of myself in her, the way she double-checked everything and took notes in neat, slanted handwriting. She asked a lot of questions, and I didn't mind. It felt good to be the one with answers. 2 weeks before Christmas, a large envelope arrived at my door. Inside was a folded letter with my name written in my mother's handwriting. The paper smelled faintly of the lavender soap she always kept by the kitchen sink. The letter was quiet, almost hesitant. She didn't use the word sorry, but she said she had been reflecting. She wrote about how hard it was to raise children with different needs. She mentioned her own childhood, her father's temper, the way she was taught to smooth things over rather than speak up. She wrote, "It doesn't excuse anything, Alexandra, but maybe it helps explain how I became that version of myself." There was no signature at the end, just a single line, "I'd like to meet for coffee if you're open to it." I folded the letter and sat with it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just felt still. We met at a small cafe near my old high school, the one with the red awnings and the oversized booths. She was already there when I arrived, holding a cup of chamomile tea and wearing the same coat she'd worn for years, navy blue, with a missing button near the wrist. I ordered coffee and sat down across from her. She looked older than I remembered. Not frail, just softer. She asked how work was going. I told her about Cassidy. She asked if I still liked my apartment. I said yes. We didn't talk about the night I left. Not then. It wasn't a breakthrough. It wasn't dramatic. But when she reached across the table and touched my hand, I didn't pull away. The following week, Ethan texted again, thinking about getting a job. "You said you'd help with budgeting," I replied. "Sure. Want to come over Sunday afternoon?" He said yes. He showed up with a notebook and a bag of frozen burritos. I made tea. We sat on the floor with a spreadsheet I printed from work, and I walked him through how to break down his expenses. He nodded slowly, writing things down in small slanted letters. Afterward, he stayed for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and a store-bought salad mix, but he helped clean up without being asked. As he dried the dishes, he said, "I didn't realize how much you were doing back then. I thought it was just how things worked. I didn't respond. I didn't need to." He came by again the next weekend. This time he brought his laundry. "If you show me how I'll do it myself," he said. And he did. That December, my apartment started to feel like more than just a safe place. It started to feel like home. I hung the mirror from the antique market by the door and placed the bookshelf in the corner near the window. I filled it with novels I hadn't touched in years, and a few new ones I picked up on sale. On the bottom shelf, I placed a small ceramic housewarming gift Mrs. Peterson had given me months earlier. It had the words, "She believed she could, so she did," painted in soft blue script. It was around this time that Diana pulled me aside again. She was forming a new project team for a regional client account and wanted me to lead it. "It's more visibility," she said. "A chance to shape the structure, not just follow it." I said yes. That Christmas, I didn't go back to the house. Instead, I invited Jessica, Ethan, and Cassidy over for dinner. It was quiet with mismatched chairs and folding tables, but it felt right. Jessica brought gingerbread cookies. Ethan set the table, and Cassidy offered to bring a pie but forgot it in her car. After we ate, we sat around talking. No one mentioned family drama or old arguments or who hadn't shown up. We just passed around cups of cider and traded stories. Later, when everyone had left, I stood at the kitchen sink, hands in warm water, thinking about everything that had led to that night. The old wounds hadn't vanished, but something else had taken root alongside them, a sense of rhythm, of choice, of a life that was finally my own. The first days of the new year came in slow and gray like they always did. I cleared out the last of the holiday decorations and tucked them in a storage bin under my bed. The apartment felt smaller without the twinkle lights, but it also felt cleaner, more settled. On Sunday evening, I made soup and opened my laptop at the kitchen table, scanning through work notes and budget projections. Halfway through typing an email to Diana, I paused. I had a sudden urge to visit the lake near the walking path I joined back in the fall. I hadn't been in weeks. I grabbed my coat and walked the 2 blocks in the cold gloves tucked in my pocket scarf pulled high. The trail was mostly empty, just one older couple with a dog and a few joggers passing by. I stood near the edge of the water watching a thin crust of ice form near the shore. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't trying to solve anything. I didn't feel pressure to fix, serve, or explain. I just stood there and let the stillness settle. That same week, Cassidy stopped by my desk and handed me a small notebook with a green leather cover. "I saw this at the bookstore," she said. "You mentioned wanting to keep track of your client meetings in one place." I turned it over in my hands, a little surprised. "Thank you," I said. "That's really thoughtful. You've helped me a lot," she said. "It's nice to feel like I can return the favor." Later that night, I tucked the notebook into my work bag, then sat on the couch with a cup of mint tea and turned off the TV. I stared at the ceiling for a long while, remembering how heavy everything used to feel in this space, the fear, the loneliness, the exhaustion. Now it felt like mine. Quiet, yes, but grounded. By mid-January, I had fully taken over leadership of the regional client account. Diana had stepped back as planned, and I ran the Monday briefings alone now. The work was steady and sometimes demanding, but I didn't dread it. I started walking to the office most mornings, just to feel my feet moving before the day began. One morning, as I crossed the street near the office, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. "Mom wants to have dinner this week. All of us. She says Dad's mellowed out." I read it twice before responding. "What kind of dinner?" "Just us. Nothing big. Friday. 6. I waited a few minutes before typing back. "Okay, I'll come, but I'm not staying late." Friday arrived with a bitter wind and low clouds. I wore a dark gray sweater and my heaviest coat. Jessica offered to drive me, but I said I'd take my own car. I think she knew I needed to do this part alone. The house looked the same from the outside, the same mailbox with the leaning post, the same porch light that flickered slightly when I rang the bell. My mother answered hair pinned up apron still tied around her waist. "Alexandra," she said softly, "come in." I stepped inside. Ethan was already in the living room thumbing through his phone. He looked up and gave me a nod. "Hey." "Hey," I replied. My father came in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Glad you came," he said. His voice didn't carry the sharpness it used to. He didn't reach for a hug. He just stepped aside and gestured toward the dining room. The table was set with mismatched plates and a simple roast chicken at the center. There were candles, but none were lit. I took a seat at the far end opposite my mother. No one said grace or made a toast. We just passed dishes and filled plates. Halfway through the meal, my father cleared his throat. "Things have changed around here," he said. "Not all at once, but your mother's been saying we have to do better." My mother nodded, not looking up. "I've started volunteering on Mondays at the library. It's quiet, but I like it." Ethan added, "I'm working part-time now, front desk at the gym near Jefferson Street." I blinked. "Really?" He nodded. "Started last week. It's different, but I needed to do something." I set down my fork. "I'm glad." My mother looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "I know we said things before, and I know we can't take them back, but we're trying." I held her gaze. "Trying matters, but it has to last longer than one meal." "I know," she said. "I do." After dinner, I helped carry the plates into the kitchen. My father rinsed them without a word. My mother brought out a small tin of cookies, the kind she used to bake around the holidays. She placed it on the counter between us and pushed it gently toward me. "You don't have to take them," she said, "but I thought maybe you'd like them." I took one, just one. "I should get going," I said. She walked me to the door. "Will we see you again soon?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. But this was a good start. Back at my apartment, I set the cookie on a napkin and made a cup of tea. I didn't eat it right away. I just sat quietly looking out at the streetlights. Something had shifted, not fixed, not forgotten, but softened. By spring, the rhythm of my days had become something steady. I'd wake early, take a short walk before work, and make coffee in the same chipped mug I'd found at a yard sale during my second week in the apartment. There were new plants in the windowsill, a pothos that trailed toward the sunlight, and a basil plant that struggled but held on. On Sundays, Ethan came by in the afternoon, sometimes with laundry, sometimes with questions about money, and sometimes he came just to sit. One Sunday in late March, he arrived with a folded piece of paper and a nervous look on his face. "Can I show you something?" he asked, stepping inside and setting his backpack down near the door. I nodded, motioning toward the table. He unfolded the paper carefully like it mattered. "It's a course list," he said. "Community college. I've been thinking about signing up for the fall." I looked it over. Intro to business, public speaking, a basic computer skills course. "These are good," I said. "They're solid starting points." He sat across from me. "I'm not saying I'll stick with all of it, but I want to try. I need something that's mine." I didn't say much else, just helped him sort through the registration page and showed him where to look for financial aid forms. He stayed for dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, and washed the dishes while I dried. That same week, my mother called. "Your father wants to invite you to his birthday dinner," she said. "It's just going to be a small thing. No speeches, no surprises." I agreed cautiously. The dinner was quiet, just the four of us. Ethan came late, straight from work, still in his uniform shirt. My father seemed tired but calmer. He asked me about the new client I'd picked up. I told him I'd been selected to speak at a regional finance panel that summer. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "You've done well," he said. better than I ever expected. It wasn't an apology, but it was more than I'd been given before. As I walked to the car afterward, my mother followed me out. She handed me a small photo envelope. "These were in the attic," she said. "I thought you might want them." Inside were pictures from when I was little, a birthday party in the backyard, a family camping trip, one where I was pushing Ethan on a swing. My hands lingered on the edges. "Thank you," I said. "I'll take care of them." Over the next few weeks, I noticed small changes in Ethan. He texted less often for help, started managing his own appointments, even talked about saving up for a used car. He still had moments of frustration, but the tone was different, less entitled, more uncertain, more aware. One morning I arrived at work early and found a note on my desk. It was from Cassidy. "Your presentation last week inspired me to pitch a process update." Diana approved it. I smiled, tucked the note in my drawer, and started my day. Life wasn't perfect. I still had days where I avoided certain songs or moments that reminded me of the night I packed my bag and left the only home I'd ever known. But those memories no longer shaped every corner of my life. That April, Ethan invited me to his apartment, a small studio above a bakery he'd found on a friend's recommendation. He'd moved in a week earlier. "It's not much," he said as he opened the door. "But it's mine." It was clean mostly. A couch that doubled as a bed, a tiny desk in the corner, and a kitchen that barely held two people. But there was pride in the way he gave the tour. He showed me the cabinet where he kept his spices, the schedule he'd taped to the fridge, the receipt for his first rent payment. "I made it work," he said. "You were right. It's hard, but it feels good." I nodded. "You did this yourself, Ethan. I'm proud of you." He looked down, hands in his pockets. "I couldn't have done any of it without you." I stayed for tea and we talked about the fall semester. He was thinking about shifting from business to something more hands-on, maybe graphic design, maybe fitness coaching. He hadn't decided, but he was thinking beyond the next week, and that was something. That evening, as I walked back to my car, I paused to look up at his apartment window. The light was on. The curtain moved slightly with the breeze. It was quiet, and for once I didn't feel responsible for holding everything together. I just felt proud. Back at my apartment, I sat at the table and flipped through the old photo envelope my mother had given me. I pulled out one picture me at about 8 years old, arms crossed, standing in front of the flower bed I used to help tend. I set it on the fridge with a small magnet and stepped back. That girl had no idea where she'd end up, but she was still here, standing. The weeks after Ethan settled into his own place felt different. The calls for small rescues grew fewer, and when we spoke, he carried himself with a steadiness I hadn't seen in years. He told me about late nights studying, about the quiet pride he felt paying rent with money he had earned, and about the new friends he was meeting at school. Each story reminded me how far he had come and how far I had come too. One Saturday in May, he invited me to his apartment again. This time, he cooked dinner, a simple pasta dish with garlic bread. It wasn't perfect, but he grinned as he set the plates on the table, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen him look so content. We ate, laughed over the burnt edges of the bread, and for a moment, it felt like a beginning instead of a patchwork repair. Afterward, he grew quiet. "I don't know if I ever said it right," he admitted, staring at his hands. "Thank you for everything, for not giving up on me." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You're doing the hard part, Ethan. You chose to change. That's yours, not mine." When I left that night, I passed the bakery downstairs, its windows glowing against the dark street. I thought about the years of silence, of bending myself into someone I wasn't just to hold the family together, and how all of it had led here, not to perfection, but to something real. By summer, I stood on stage at the regional panel I had once only dreamed of. The lights were warm, the audience attentive. When I spoke about resilience and the discipline of building security from the ground up, I wasn't only speaking about numbers. I was speaking about us, about rebuilding, about choosing dignity over despair. Looking back now, the bitterness that once sat heavy in my chest has thinned. My parents are still learning step by step. Ethan is finding his way. And I finally am standing in a life shaped by my own choices. It's quieter than I once imagined, but it's strong. It's mine. If there is anything I carry from this journey, it's this family may falter, but strength does not vanish in their absence. Sometimes it grows in the silence they leave behind, and with patience, even broken places can hold new roots. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of your own path or someone you love, I'd invite you to share it. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, you're welcome to stay connected here.